Well, let's move on, man. Let's there's I was listening to a podcast recently, and like I told you before, every time a subject comes up that I think would be good for the show, I jot it down. But someone was talking about Exhibit, right?
Okay.
Lonzo?
Yeah. Exhibit.
Yeah, the rapper, you know him. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Just making sure you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. So back in the day, they had a group, Exhibit, Saphir, and Razkaz had a group called the Golden State Warriors. And they were straight up hip hop backpack rappers. If you saw the early Exhibit, I mean, he was straight backpack. He dressed like a hip hopper, you know what I mean? Dre wanted to sign them as a group, Dr. Dre. And Dr. Dre said, okay, cool. You guys got the sound. Shout out OG Steve. Thank you so much. Shout out
What's
to
up,
Saran.
Dave?
Yeah, Dr. Dre wants to sign Exhibit, Razkaz, and Saphir, the Golden State Warriors. And when it comes to signing them, he says, all right, cool. Now you guys got to put on your costume. So they're all looking at each other like, what do you mean by costume? What do you mean by costume? He wanted them to, by costume, he wanted them to start wearing Dickie suits, Chuck Taylors, dressing the part of a street dude, gangster dude. Razkaz, straight up hip hopper, he's like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not my vibe. I don't do that. Saphir is from the Bay Area, so Saphir is like, well, there's no banging in the Bay. I'd be perpetrating myself. The only one who agreed to put on the costume, according to this person who was being interviewed, was Exhibit.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember, but as a hip hopper, I remember when he transitioned from a backpacker to like kind of doing some gangster content. But he was the only one, and eventually he went on to sell millions of records, went on tour with Dr. Dre and Aftermath, and was signed and all that. The costume, Lonzo. Talk to me when you hear that story. What are your thoughts?
I talked about this earlier today in regards to my personal situation. If you prepared to make that transition and go for the money, some people call it selling out, some people call it buying in. It all depends on how you want to look at it. Okay. People ask me all the time. I did an interview last Thursday, and that was one of the questions. Why did you follow the steps of N.W.A? That never was me. Okay. I couldn't. I always got to stay down from. I got to be true to myself, Doc. And some people don't have that same allegiance to themselves, and it worked out for him for the most part. He did a lot of good stuff. He got shows and whatever the case may be. Allegedly, Broad took a lot of money from him, but he's back working. I see he's back on some shows with Quick and some other folks. So some people understand. And here's another part: some people understand that a lot of what you see on stage is just that. It's an act. It's an act. ACT. It's costume. It's not a lifestyle. But because so many people believe the OG moniker of hip hop and everything you come out of a hip hopper's mouth is keeping it real, keeping it 100, you don't bother to vet the person's history. You just accept what comes out their mouth for being reality, and you go for it. And then you get pissed off when you find out, oh, but he wasn't what? No, man, he wasn't. And that's our fault. You wanted to buy something, they sold it to you, but you didn't buy you didn't get what you thought you was paying for, and now you mad.
Yep. And one of his rationales, according to this person being interviewed, was Dr. Dre's rationale for doing this was it worked for him back in the late 80s, early 90s when Dr. Dre made the transition from, dancing in World Class Wrecking Crew, doing his thing, to becoming a gangster, at least image-wise. Now, we've talked about this before, Lonzo, but take us back to the day that you turned on the TV and you saw these dudes that you basically raised, meaning Ice Cube, Yella, and Dr. Dre, dressed up as gangsters and talking gangster stuff.
It wasn't a one day thing. I was looking at a picture of this guy today on Facebook, and they didn't come off originally as being gangsters. It was always street in the beginning. Okay, it's a picture I saw today. Dre had on a tam, a little French tam. Yella had his hat just kind of cocked sideways, and so did Ren. But when you think about the original music they made, something to dance to, Panic Zone, what's the other one? When they was Express Yourself, that wasn't gangster. That was more of what they started off doing, reality. And later on, after I think the second album cover, that's when they came off as the gangster rappers. And but to see them be successful I was cool with that. Okay, I've always said, and I'll say it again, I'll tell anybody, I only had a problem with the name, man. But when they started doing saying certain things, I knew I couldn't be a part of that. You know, the bitches and the hoes, that wasn't gonna work for me. I'd have been the old man leading the young men down the wrong path, and they probably would have had it the whole time when they were being ridiculed, running over CDs and DVDs. I mean, CDs and cassettes. It probably would have been magnified because my black ass would have been right there in the beginning, in the front, and it'd have been real fucked up. So nah, man, I'm cool.
Did any of them, meaning Yella, Dre, or I'm having the brain fart, dude. Did any of them confide in you and say, hey, you know, we're thinking about going this route, or it just kind of showed up one day? Or,
they talked about it in the beginning around the house, doing some reality raps, the gangster raps. The term gangster rap was never something I heard come out their mouth. Never. It was always reality raps. We're going to start doing stuff like Mixmaster Spade, Toddy T had set the bar already for reality raps. They were being successful with it. We was making records already, making bootleg records. Run DMC was doing their thing. They looking a lot more raw. They weren't as flashy as World Class Record Crew, and that was kind of the vibe they was going for. Later on, it became something else.